Bibles then, and we're going to study tonight, begin a study in Samuel. How many know anything about Samuel?
I'm a descendant of Samuel. Samuelson.
Samuel's son. Yep. That's how those work.
Keep that in mind as we learn about this guy.
My son's name is Samuel. None of those people. So, we're going to take a look at Samuel, but before we kind of get into the story and get to 1 Samuel and see about his birth and all that kind of stuff, and he does have one of those rare ones. There are only a handful, less than a handful, of people in the Bible whose story begins before they're born. And his is one of them. People like John the Baptist, Samson, Jesus, they actually start before they're born. Moses, but these all, there's only a few of them though. Most of the prophets and judges we meet in the midst of their life. We have no idea where they came from or what they're all about, but Samuel's one of those. And we start with the very beginning of his story, which I wanted to, before we start that though, let's look at the context. What kind of world was Samuel being born into? And to kind of kick off our mind process, I want you to think about a moment the year you were born. 1782, 1805, whatever that happened to be. I don't know how old people are out there.
Not 1805.
No? Okay. Well, whatever year you were born, what was the world like? Now, sometimes we like to get this, wonderful vision of how wonderful it used to be and how today it's so much worse than it used to be. But really, in fact, just taking a page out of my life, I was born in 1966. Anybody remember what was going on in 1966? Was it a world just as wonderful?
No.
It was turmoil in this country. Let's talk about this country, not necessarily worldwide, but just in this country. Vietnam War was going on. And then we had this great division amongst the generations where the young people started rebelling, and we had people like Timothy Leary creating whole religions around drug use and things like that. LSD was finally, in 1966, made illegal. For years, it was just running rampant. Acid and those kinds of things. Drug use was rampant. Sex was rampant. Everything was, immorality was everywhere in that generation. And we had the Vietnam War going on. Not only that, but in 1966, a guy by the name of Fidel Castro came into power. So we have the spread of what? Communism in our backyard. Lyndon Johnson was president. A civil rights movement. And why did we need a civil rights movement? How were people treated in this country? How were minorities treated in this country? How were women treated in this country back then in 1966? Was it good times for all? Plus, anybody know who Anton LaVey is? Yes. He started, in 1966, he started the Church of Satan and published his Satanic Bible in California. San Francisco, Hotel California is all about that. Yes, so that's the kind of world I was born in. And frankly, if you said, we're going to send you into a time when there is this Cold War going on, wars going on, generational, there's going to be campuses that are going to be on fire, people being killed in the streets, riots over civil rights, and there's going to be all this stuff. Would you say, let's bring a kid into that environment? Well, we got better. Did we? I don't know if we got that much better. Because you know what happened after 1966. 1967, 1968, we had a president who had to resign because he was breaking into people's offices. We had political turmoil. We had assassinations of people like Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. And just turmoil in this world. Just in this country, worldwide, it was a problem, wasn't it? That's the world I was born into. What about you?
World War II.
World War II. The war after the war, in all wars, right?
90s boy bands?
90s boy bands, yeah. Talking about it, yeah. You had it rough. So, what's that? Hair bands. The big old hair bands. Yeah. So, I mean, the kind of world does influence you, though, doesn't it? And let's let's look at the world that Samuel was coming into. So let's go to Judges chapter 10. Now, sometimes in our mind, I just want to clear something up for our minds here. When you read the book of Judges, how many like to think that it was this judge over all of Israel, and then it was this judge over all of Israel, and then it was this judge over all of Israel, and then this judge, and then this judge, and this judge? There's 12 listed, and they all have their over all of Israel. That's not true. Judges often overlapped, where one person actually was ruling in one area of Israel, and another one was getting rid of people in another area of Israel. And that's definitely the case during when Samuel was born. About that time, there was actually, they estimate 5 different judges were operating in Israel. One of them was Jephthah. He was probably born after these particular events, but it was during Jephthah's reign, and he was over here. He was over this area that they called the other side of Jordan. And if you remember, when the people came and they conquered the land, they first conquered this area over here of the Amorites and the Ammonites. And some of the tribes, Reuben, half-tribe of Manasseh, and Gad, all said, we want this land. We don't want to go in that land. Give us this land. The deal was, we'll give you that land, but you've got to come over and help us conquer this one, then you can come back, right? Well, it was this land over there that Jephthah was ruling over and driving out the Ammonites. In fact, let's take a little look at what was going on. Judges chapter 10, starting in verse 6. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam, and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, and the gods of Zidon, and the gods of Moab, and the gods of the children of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord, and served not him. Now this is interesting to me because this is the longest list of other gods that they were worshiping anywhere in the book of Judges. Usually it's like, oh, other gods. But it's like, we're running them down. It's all of these guys that were being worshipped in all of Israel. So what did God do? Verse 7. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the children of Ammon. And what happened is the Ammonites came from this side. They came and they started taking this land over here and eventually started going across the river into this area, and that's what they called Jephthah. Philistines are over here, in what used the area called Dan. The area that Dan was supposed to take, the tribe of Dan. But they're the ones that got there and said, oh, there's people. So they left. And they wandered around for a long time. We'll get to the rest of their story later on. And that area was over here with the Philistines. And later on, who is God going to use to start to release them from the Philistines? Samson. So this is an area because who were they going after? All of these other gods. So God said, I'm bringing everybody. I'm hitting you on both sides here. Verse 8. And that year they vexed and oppressed the children of Israel 18 years. All the children of Israel that were on the other side of Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is in Gilead. Moreover, the children of Ammon passed over Jordan to fight also against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was sore distressed. So they came in here and they started heading down south. This is Ephraim, this is Benjamin, and this is Judah. And so they started coming over here. So for 18 years, they were tormenting the people over here. And now they were coming into the rest of Israel. Meanwhile, who's over here? The Philistines. Is this a problem? So what did the people do? They called on God. That's what they always did, isn't it? Let's call on God to keep us from this terrible disaster. So they did. Verse 10. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, saying, We have sinned against thee, both because we have forsaken our God and also served Balaam. Anybody know things lacking from that list? All the other one. They know God hates Balaam, and they've been doing Balaam, so we'll talk about that one. The Lord said unto the children of Israel, Did I not deliver you from the Egyptians? By the way, did he? from the slavery, brought them into this land. And from the Amorites, didn't he conquer this land once for them? Yeah. And the Moabites did oppress you. And you cried to me, and I delivered you out of their hand, didn't I? Oh, sorry. I jumped ahead a little bit. From the Amorites, and from the children of Ammon, and from the Philistines, I've already delivered you from these people once. In fact, a couple of times, actually, by now. And the Zidonians also, and the Amalekites, and the Moabites did oppress you, and you cried to me, and I delivered you out of the hand. It's like, listen, folks. You keep worshiping other gods. I bring in people to oppress you to learn. You cry to me, I help you, and what am I getting out of this? What is God getting out of this? They learning? No. Verse 13. Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Wherefore I will deliver you no more. So what did they do? Kind of like a child was told to clean their room. They didn't clean their room. Told to clean their room, or else they didn't clean their room. Clean your room, or I'm going to ground you and take away your computer and your phone and every TV and everything. And they still don't clean their room. And then the parents come in and actually take away the TV and the phone and the computer. So what does the kid do? I'm cleaning my room. That's exactly what they did. Verse 16. And they put away the strange gods from among them and served the Lord, and his soul was grieved for the misery of Israel. So like they actually went and actually got rid of all the idols and everything and actually turned back to God. So God said what? All right, I'll help you. Verse 17, then the children of Ammon were gathered together and encamped in Gilead, and the children of Israel assembled themselves together and encamped in Mizpah. And the people and princes of Gilead said one to another, what man is he that will begin to fight against the children of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. Whoever, we will make him king, ruler of this entire area over here. Who will do it? And they looked around and there was nobody. Except a guy named Jephthah. And Jephthah has an interesting back history. His father had an affair, and he was born of that affair, so the rest of the family kicked him out of the house. In fact, the whole city kicked him out, wanted nothing to do with him, banished him. So as he grew up a fighter, a big-time fighter. In fact, as he grew up, he's like the original Robin Hood. He basically had a band of merry men who were a bunch of crooks and thieves and murderers, and they would go around. They were hired mercenaries. So who did the people of Gilead go to? Hey, Jephthah, remember us? Remember all those terrible things we did? We like you now. We will give you everything if you will just come and war with us. And he said, okay, I will do that. So I like Jephthah, because he was actually a pretty smart guy. He actually sent a letter to the Ammonites first and said, so what's the problem? Why are you trying to take our stuff? And they, of course, wrote back and said, what? It was ours first. We used to have that land. And you came and said, we're just taking it back. It sounds like Ukraine and Russia, right? It's like, it was ours first. So he's like, and he wrote back and said, no. And I love this by Jephthah. He says, we didn't take it from you. God took it from you. And our God will not allow you to take it back. So the Ammonites said, well, our God is going to take it. So they went to war. In fact, let's jump down to verse 29 of chapter 11. So they went to war. And was God with Jephthah? Yep. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed over Gilead and Manasseh, and passed over Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed over unto the children of Ammon. And Jephthah vowed a vow with the Lord, and said, if thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon unto mine hands, then it shall be, that whatsoever comes forth of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. Now, I don't like him so much. he did a pretty good job with Ammon trying to do, the letters first and things like that, not go to war, but this was dumb. Was God on his side? Was he going to win? What do you think was going to come out of the house? I don't care what it was. If there's something coming out to greet you, I don't care if it was a chicken. It means it was happy to see you, right? What do you think? The dog? Is that better? Something that's going to come and greet me out of my house, I'm going to burn it up. But that's what he said. I will sacrifice it to you. So Jephthah passed over unto the children of Ammon to fight against them. The Lord delivered them into his hands. And they smote them from Aroer, even till thou comest to Minnith, even 20 cities, and to the plain of the vineyards with a very great slaughter. Thus the children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. So they drove across here, and he drove them right back and completely out of Gilead and destroyed them by the hand of God. And then he went back home a victor, and what came out of the house first? His daughter. This is the kind of world that Samuel's going to come into. Where a guy who makes rash vows, who has a sketchy history, who does some silly things, but also some good things. Jephthah does some really good things. That's the kind of world he's coming in, where Jephthah was ruling over Gilead when he was born. Probably later in his reign, but still. He was a judge over Gilead when he was born. That's not the end of the story, though. Because there was also some other things that came out of this battle that just do not look good for Israel. Let's go to chapter 12, verse 1. And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves. Ephraim, again, this area right here. Remember, the Ammonites were coming in, they were coming across Ephraim's territory and going down into Benjamin and into Judah. And the call went out from Jephthah. Everybody come help me. God has anointed me. The people of Gilead have chosen me. Let's go. And the people of Ephraim said, not my problem. Until they won. And when they won, it's like, well, why didn't you let us play? That's what they said. And then these gathered together and went northward and said unto Jephthah, wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house upon thee with fire. This is the kind of world, this is a weird world he's coming into, isn't it? Does that sound like the people are getting along? Seem like the tribes are getting along? Does it seem like a team effort? No, very divided. And of course, Jephthah said unto them, verse 2, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, you delivered me not out of their hands. You didn't come out. I did. I sent messengers, I sent to you, and you would not come. And when I saw that you delivered me not, I put my life in my hands, and I passed over against the children of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are you come up to me this day to fight against me? What's your problem? And unfortunately, they did fight. And we have a little civil war going on here. So you have this great victory over this enemy, and it leads immediately to what? Battling each other. In fact, killing each other. Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, you Gileads are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. You belong to us. You're a traitor to us. And they start calling names and all kinds of stuff. So it's like, let's fight. That's what people did back then. And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites, and it was so that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, let me go over, that the men of Gilead said unto them, art thou an Ephraimite? And if they said, no, then they said unto them, say now, Sibboleth. Now, this is a word actually we still use today, a Sibboleth. is a word that some people can say and some can't based on their dialect. And Ephraimites could not say Sibleth, Shibleth. They could not make that correct sound. And he said Sibleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. So they said Thibleth instead of Sibleth, Shibleth. So couldn't get it. Their dialect could not let them say. I don't know. And they took him and slew him at the passage of Jordan, and there fell at that time the Ephraimites 42,000. That's not a small little skirmish, is it? 42,000 Ephraimites died. Ammonites wouldn't have done that much damage. That's the world that he's coming in, where these tribes are battling against each other, pride over one another, hating one another, killing each other, at the same time worshiping other gods, only turning to God when God punishes them, right? Leaders who make rash vows. And then, what about the Philistines? Who is the great leader that's going to come and save them? Chapter 13, verse 1. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. The Lord delivered them in the hand of the Philistines 40 years. And again, these times overlap between the Ammonites and these. And this is definitely this judge's time during this 40 years is definitely right in the heart of when Samuel was born. And who is that guy? And there was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman, and said unto her, Behold, now thou art barren and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not anything unclean. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. For he shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And who is this great man called by God from the womb to come and deliver the people of Israel from the Philistines? Samson. And immediately thought goes to what? It's not a strong judgeship, was it? And he's in this area. Again, this is the area that Dan was supposed to take. That's why the Danites were kind of still living down that area. And that's where the Philistines were. Philistines really had control of the entire area. And of course, we know the story. And it's a sad story. Samson grew up, and he did not want to marry an Israelite. He liked hanging out with the who? The Philistines. In fact, he wanted to marry a Philistine. His father and mother said, no, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. But he did it anyways. And that's where he had the riddle that he told at the marriage party, and how those guys, they basically threatened his wife to give him the answer, and they gave it to him, so he got angry, and he burned down everybody's crops with some foxes and torches. I mean, it's a great story, but this is our leader. This is our leadership. I mean, sometimes, yes, we look around us and say, where are the leaders in this world? Where were the leaders? These are the leaders who are doing this kind of stuff. Killing 1,000 guys with the jawbone of an ass. Ripping out gates because he was stuck at the house of a prostitute. And Samson. And then, of course, did he learn his lesson about those Philistine women? Because then he met who? Delilah. Who came and said, what is the source of your strength? And he gave all kinds of things. Oh, some wisps, and weave my hair into a loom, and new ropes will do it. None of them do it until she finally, crying and all that stuff, finally, he tells her, doesn't he? Sad, isn't it? And what happened? Let's go to chapter 16, verse 23. Because of Delilah, laying his head down, and the guy came in and cut his hair, and when she said, "Oh no, the Philistines are here," he got up thinking he would whoop them, but he couldn't. He had no strength. And so they took him and they gouged out his eyes and made him basically like a donkey, just pushing a middle thing around. So everybody can laugh at him. And laugh at who? God, too. Then finally, they had a big party in the temple of their god, Dagon. So they said, let's bring out Samson. Let's make fun of him. Chapter 16, verse 23. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and to rejoice. For they said, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. What was their testimony in the world? Terrible testimony. They made God look weak. But is God weak? No. They made God look weak. Made Dagon look strength. Was Dagon strong? No, not at all. Verse 25, it came to pass when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. The pillar is right in the middle. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by his hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house stands, that I may lean upon them. Give me some nice big sturdy pillars so I can lean on them a little bit. I think it's interesting that a small child was leading him around now. That's how much they were making sport of him. And he's in chains, he can't see. What a little kid can lead him around. And he put him there. Verse 27, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. They made him dance. I don't know what they made him do. They were making him a fool. And they're all laughing at him. So you had 3,000 people on the roof, thousands inside, all the leaders, all the priests, all the people of the land, all making fun of Samson and his God. And Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once. Just one more time. That I may be at once avenged of the Philistines from my two eyes. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might. And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which were slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Man, he was a nuclear weapon. There's nobody could have taken him. Nobody could have stopped him. He could have delivered them from the Philistines forever. But God knew even before he was born, he was only going to start to deliver them. That's the kind of leader it was. Verse 31, then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. So 20 years. He had 20 years to do great things, and he didn't really do anything great until his death. That's the kind of world Samuel's coming into. Good one? Even those who are tapped by God aren't really doing a whole lot. In fact, there were a bunch of others, about 3 other ones. One about here, one here, and one down in Bethlehem, and they weren't much better. They were just, their kids were running around with donkeys. They had like 30 kids, like 30 sons and 20 daughters. This is the kind of leadership that was going on. Not good, is it? That's the spiritual leaders. That's the military leaders. This isn't good. That's the world Samuel came in. But what about the people? How bad exactly were they? Terrible. 18. Oh, I'm sorry. 17. Verse 1. people were terrible too. And there was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. So again, this area right here, right around. Now Shiloh's on here because Shiloh was where Joshua. Let's go all the way back. Get your mind back to Joshua. When they conquered the land, it was at Shiloh that he got everybody together and said, okay, we're going to parcel out the land. Where you go and take the land. It was at Shiloh. Shiloh became kind of the capital. It's where they put the tabernacle. It's kind of the place where the tabernacle stayed for a very long time. It was in Shiloh. So it was there. And that's in Ephraim. And it's right there. And this guy came from Mount Ephraim, whose name was Micah. And he said unto his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, and about which thou cursest and spakest of also in mine ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, blessed be thou of the Lord my son. Thanks for stealing it, but being honest about it. So what did she do? She said, tell you what, I'll give it to you, and let's make an idol out of it. Micah's quite the character. He decides to make an idol out of it. Not only that, but a guy comes by from Bethlehem. Let's jump to verse 6. And in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did what was right in his own eyes. I want you to keep that phrase in mind, because we're going to hear it over and over and over again in these chapters. No king, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Is that ever a good idea? No. In fact, when the world was that way and everybody did what was right in their own eyes, we had Noah. But that's what Israel was like. This is not a good time. That's the world Samuel was born into. Really no leadership. These judges were not that great. And everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. Verse 7, and there was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah, so to sojourn where he could find a place. And he came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of who? Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said unto him, whence comest thou? And he says unto him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem, Judah, and I go to sojourn where I might find a place. And Micah said unto him, dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest. Now, are Levites supposed to be priests? Yes, if they're the Aaron. And appointed by who? By God. This is not that guy. In fact, if he's from Bethlehem, Judah, he's an Ephrathite. That's not his job. He's not supposed to be a priest. But the guy said what? Cool. In fact, they made the whole gown. They took money and they made the whole gown and the breastplate and the ephod. They did the whole, made him look just like a priest. And he was a priest to worship this idol that they made. That's the kind of world. It gets worse. Chapter 18. And in those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day all their inheritance had not fallen to them among the tribes of Israel. So when in Shiloh Joshua said, everybody, here's your land, this was the land Dan was supposed to get. Again, they got there and said, there's people there, that looks hard. So all this time, the entire time of Joshua conquered the land for 7 years, and all the time of the judges, which is considerable, what have the Danites been doing? Just wandering around. We have no inheritance. Whose fault is that? Theirs. They happen upon Micah. They say, hey, dude, how you doing? What you got there? So I got an idol, and I've got a priest. They're like, cool. We could use one of those. Let's take them. So they take the idol, and they take the priest, and they go, and they land up here. This becomes the land of Dan. And this is important because when Israel splits from, this is many years later, when Israel splits from Judah, there is still an idol in Dan that is being worshipped. A golden calf. And that's why the king who comes in for Israel said, you know what? We ought to have an idol in Dan and an idol down here in Samaria so people can come and worship God. But where did it start? During the time of Samuel. as the world was just, there was no king, and everybody did what? What was right in their own eyes. How many agree that's bad? That is not the worst thing that happened. Chapter 19. And it came to pass in those days there was no king in Israel, and there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. By the way, all of these stories have things in common. Ephraim and Bethlehem. So, quite an interesting study if you ever want to take a look at it. But here we have this guy. He takes a wife, concubine, from Bethlehem. He lives here. She's unfaithful. Casts her out, but then he feels bad. So he travels down to Bethlehem and says, you know, I'm really sorry. Sorry I got so mad. Take me back. Let's be. And the dad doesn't want to let him go. Let her go and him go. So he keeps delaying and delaying and delaying. But finally they say, okay, it's dark outside, but we're going to go. So they start heading out. They're going to Jebus, which is also Jerusalem. So they go to Jerusalem, and they start heading. They said, well, we go to Ramah, we go to Gibeah. Let's go to Gibeah. So they end up in Gibeah, and it's late. And bad things happen. These are the people of the house of Benjamin. And the men of the town come and say, hey, give us the woman. Well, it gives the man. They put the woman out there.
It's just worse.
Yeah. And then they basically have their way with her all night. And then she just gets dumped on the steps, dead, the next morning. So this man from Ephraim, in Gibeah, cuts her into 12 pieces and ships it a piece to each of the tribes and says, we need to do something about this. This is the world that Samuel's coming into. How far have they fallen? So all the rest of the tribes say, okay, Benjamin, give us those guys in Gibeah. Give them to us. And Benjamin says, no, we will defend them to the death. So the rest of the tribes say, okay. Now they don't win right off, because are the rest of the tribes guiltless and all this kind of stuff? No, they're terrible too. They don't win right off, but they eventually conquer. In fact, they end up basically wiping out almost all the men of Benjamin. Is that a problem? Yeah, it's a problem. Because that's one of the 12 tribes. They can't completely wipe it out. and they're left with 6,000. 6,000 men in the entire tribe of Benjamin. They're like, uh-oh. And by the way, no women. So how are we going to keep this going? 6,000 men, but no women. How are we going to get this going? So they have a plan. You like plans? Chapter 21, verse 17. Chapter 21, verse 17. And they said, there must be an inheritance for them that be escaped of Benjamin, that a tribe be not destroyed out of Israel. We got to do something about these guys. They went and hid, and they're still alive, but we need women. What do you do when you need women?
You steal them, of course.
How many have seen 7 wives or 7 brothers? Anyways. How that got made, I'll never know. Anyway, something like that. Anyway. Howbeit, we may not give them wives of our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn, saying, cursed be he that gives a wife to Benjamin. So they made that. They said, none of us can give our daughters to them, because we said, cursed be them. So where are we going to find women? Then they said, behold, there is a feast of the Lord in Shiloh, yearly. Right here. In a place which is on the north side of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south side of Lebanon. Therefore, they commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards. Oh, this is a great plan. And see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in dances, then come you out of the vineyards, and catch you every man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And it shall be, when their fathers or their brethren come unto us to complain, that we will say unto them, be favorable unto them, for our sake, because we reserve not each man his wife in this war, for you did not give unto them at this time that we should be guilty. So take them. You didn't give them to us. They're not cursed because you didn't give them to them, they stole them. Isn't that better? Somehow they got around the curse. You didn't give them to them, they stole them. And that's what they did. And the children of Benjamin did so, and took them wives according to their number, and them that danced, whom they caught, and they went and returned to their inheritance, and repaired the cities, and dwelt in them. And the children of Israel departed thence at the time, every man to his tribe, to his family, and they went out from thence, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. That's how Judges ends. And this is the world that who's coming into? Samuel's coming into. By the way, of those 6,000 men, who is their famous descendant? King Saul was born of the Benjamites. So he's one of those, I think we worked it out, he's probably like a grandson of one of those guys. And the women that was kidnapped. Could have been great-grandson, but that's about as far as you can go. So that's where Samuel's coming in, into this kind of world. How's the morality of this world? How's the leadership of this world? How's the spiritual leadership of this world? Not good. And we even talked about the other guy, which we'll get into next week, Eli. Eli is also a judge. Eli is in Shiloh. He's covering this area. And he has two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And they're terrible, taking bribes and everything. It's horrible what they're doing. How is the leadership? And that's the world that Samuel gets into. So when we get to 1 Samuel next week, and you see this woman Hannah, who's just so distraught that she does not have a child, I would ask her, if I was Eli, why would you want to bring a kid into this world? Well, this place is a mess. This is a dumpster fire, right? But did God have plans for Samuel? Yeah. God had big plans for Samuel. And he's going to use Samuel. Samuel's so important because in this disaster, this chaos, where they had no king and everybody did what was right in their own eyes, Samuel's going to be the one to come in and bring some stability, some integrity, and to come in and also lead them to where they have a king. And everybody will still do what is right in their own eyes. But king won't fix that. It'll cause, in fact, other problems. But he is the one that's going to lead them into that and bring them. And the reason I want to do this study is because the way Samuel interacts with all of this going on. He really is amazing when you look at him. He had to deal with some difficult people and difficult times. But who did he always trust? Trusted God. And he would just tell people whatever God told him to tell him. And we're going to see how he handles living in this kind of world. Because how many agree? We still don't live in this kind of world. Things haven't changed that much. It's still this kind of world. A world where morality almost doesn't exist. Where spiritual leadership and political leadership is a mess. Where people are divided and hate each other and kill each other. We still live in that kind of world, don't we? How can we be a voice like Samuel's that comes in and brings some integrity and truth into this world? That's what we're going to look at in Samuel. So, you ready? That was just the introduction. You guys ready? All right? So, as we get into it, I want you to remember what kind of world he's been born into. Okay? Because it makes a difference, doesn't it? Any thoughts or questions?
I just remember I had this in my, someone gave me in the church. I don't know what does God give to Hannah. That's all.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
So I just remember this.
And he gave Samuel. Which becomes a very, very important person. And by the way, we did go through, if you ever want, this time this week you just want to do some reading, read chapter 10 through 21 of Judges. It's much worse than I told. It's crazy. what the world was like at that time. But it's crazy now. Why? Sin. People, sin. It's still the same, isn't it? So, but we can be like Samuel.